Hi, and welcome back to Old School. Today, we're going to be in the physical, mental, emotional, and I probably say spiritual too, because how our money goes really generates our feelings in every area of our life. Our teacher today is Daniel Rondberg. He's the author of No Stone Left Unturned. Daniel is an American serial entrepreneur, author, and keynote speaker. He is best known for his best-selling books, No Stone Left Unturned, Retirement Simplified, want to know about that, and Pay Off Your Mortgage. Daniel is the founder of the Rondberg companies, under which he expense publishing and advisors to authors. He is regarded for his clear-cut style of writing, storytelling that focuses straight on the core concepts of financial strategies on tax reduction and retirement security. He was listed in Yahoo Finance's top 10 entrepreneurs of 2021 in February of 2021. Daniel has been featured in several media outlets, including Forbes, CNBC, and New York Times. He has also appeared on multiple radio shows, YouTube channels, and podcasts. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. That is quite the introduction. Thank you.
Well, it could go on. You sent me quite a list, and you're quite a accomplished young man. You and I have known each other for several years. You used to work very closely with my boss, who has passed, but Mark was a character, and he brought that out in both of us, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
I've known you. You've come in and out, and you've done stuff a lot with Mark and now with Mike. But for me, when I saw a post you made, I think it was a reel, it might have just been a post, where you were talking about helping a woman who is widowed now and what to do, because a lot of times, especially like women, they're a little more mature, have stayed out of that. They've let their husband handle everything, and so they end up not knowing anything. They don't know what's going on. Well, I've been in accounting most of my life, so I kind of handled that, but I am now divorced. And my ex-husband was a little controlling about money, and we did not have retirement stuff set up. I don't have anything. Well, not anything anymore, but so a lot of what I would like in Old School, I cover how to get and maintain physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, and how our provision goes. Our housing, our job, all of those things, create turmoil or chaos in all those other areas of life. So I really want to kind of talk to you about what somebody who's just like me can do. But first, I'd like a little bit of your story, the background of how you got here and how I got you here.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And then we can start talking about that.
Okay. I'd be honored to do that. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. I love your story and what you're creating out of everything you've built, and how you're helping to share with your story with people to impact their lives. I think is absolutely incredible. And just watching you transform and step out of what I knew you as in a professional role to now as more of an entrepreneurial role has been really incredible to be a part of. So I'm grateful to you. And I'm grateful to Mark. I have to mention Mark, because he really brought us together, and I miss him every day. He's like an incredible mentor to me that I treasure the time I had with him. So I'm grateful that he introduced me to so many amazing people to be able to continue on his legacy of, relationships. That's what he was all about. So
he was. Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
So my story is pretty simple. I went to college to get a degree in finance, and halfway through got hired by JP Morgan. I left the bank to join the family business, which is where we went from, starting my career in investments to specifically focusing on helping people with retirement. And at a certain point in the family business, I had stepped away. I started a couple of companies. We really focus on helping financial advisors to author their first book. And so I did that for a little while. And then ultimately what changed my story tremendously was a good friend of mine gave me a book called The One Thing. And I read The One Thing, and it made me realize that I make the biggest impact helping people with retirement. That's where I need to be. So I called up my family. We reconvened in the family business. And so for the last 10 years, I've been, working in the family business with that little time away. But that's really my mission, is to help people realize their purpose in retirement. So what I've realized is that retirement is kind of the literal definition is kind of grim. It means to be taken out of service. And I really believe that instead of retiring from a life and a job that you hate, you get to retire to a new season of life and really get to discover and explore what your purpose is with that season and what God calls us to do in that season of life. And I think it's a really beautiful time when you can redeem a lot of those moments where you couldn't do things because you were working. Now you have the opportunity to do that. So my whole mission is to help create security, relieve financial anxiety around that. And a lot of my clients end up being women because women outlive men. So for every, one 90-year-old man I take care of, I have, 8 90-year-old women. So it's very close to my heart.
I don't know if I want to live past 90, but
No.
I can't imagine what the face in the mirror will look like then, but I get your point.
Everybody says that. They're like, oh no, I couldn't imagine living. But that's the reality is people are living longer and longer. The population of centurions is the fastest growing population on planet Earth. So people are just living a lot longer than we expected.
And they're outliving their money then that they even planned. So if people don't acknowledge that, I mean, I may not want to. I saw a video the other day that I thought was hilarious. This guy was defining what middle age was. Mm-hmm. And he said the median age that we die at is 76. He goes, so middle age is 38. He goes, so when everybody teases you at 50 for getting a weird car and calling you a middle age, no. I was like, I had my daughter at middle age.
I think that's a life expectancy counting like all of life. So that's like, right. Infants that pass away, stuff like that. Your life expectancy will age with you. So, typically it's going to be, if you get to your 60s, you're really looking at a pretty good probability that you're going to live into your 80s. And life expectancy is actually a midpoint, which is interesting. A lot of people think it's an average. It's not. Half of men and women will live to their lower to mid 80s. The other half will live beyond. And so that's why retirement is such a key issue to get a handle on early, because exactly what you said, people want to make sure they're not going to run out of money.
Right. Or even have any to start with. So we're going to discuss my hopelessness or not. No, but the Lord has been my provider, and especially so after my divorce. But it's so overwhelming. And social media can be crazy like that. I'm on there because I need to manage like my book coming out in the next year or so and all that good stuff. And I love to put my vacations and whatever on there. But the reality is you see constantly, like I may have this little pile of money and I'm like, okay, what do I do? Do I get an Amazon store? Do I make a coaching class? I mean, there's just so much that just keeps coming through. Then when it comes to actual like investing, do I get a short-term Airbnb stuff? Do I get midterm? Do I get a flip house? All of that stuff. And it ends up with a paralysis of over-analysis to me, because I'm like, do I take what money I have at the risk of not having it? But then if it's not becoming anything, it's like the guy who buried the talent, who did nothing with it after it was given to him. So that's what I mean. I do have your book, No Stone. You signed it for me. Stay fabulous. And so I think that sounds fascinating. I haven't read the whole thing in regard to like the hidden tax stuff, but I'm 60, gonna be 61 a week from today, or a month from today. And I didn't come out of my divorce with a bunch of retirement. I have started Ross. I've started some other stuff, but like, what would your process be? I walk into your office and here I am. And this is your specialty, retirement. And I want people to understand that I love your reputation and your integrity, but I'm not necessarily saying everybody has to do everything that we talk about here, but I do believe in you and what you're going to have to say, that you care about the people you're saying this to.
Absolutely.
So what would your process be?
Well, there's two things that I want to touch on, technically three, but first of all, I think money is such a key issue. And the reason why I'm out there to eliminate financial anxiety is because money is one of the major reasons people do get divorced. I'm not saying that was your situation, but that is a big issue for a lot of people. I mean, it was part of it because there was a controlling element, but there was infidelity. So. Well, there's that. That's probably the main reason. But also, going back to that controlling issue, that is a major problem I see, is exactly what you touched on in the beginning, which is sometimes women will hand off the finances to their husband. He'll run everything. And then one day they get a surprise and they're like thrust into this role and they haven't even paid bills in like 30 years. That happens all the time. And so I'm really out to try to help, women be proactive. And there's a lot of women that are hands-on. And in fact, there's a great book called The Millionaire Next Door that really, I think, proves that women are better money managers than men. In fact, most millionaires, women are the ones that run the finances in the house. So, I think it's really important to have this conversation. When you touched on about social media, I think I've been thinking a lot about this lately, because there's so many things trying to grab your attention, and it can get exhausting. Like every time you go on there's somebody selling a coaching program or a course or the next way to invest. And I just think that's so dangerous. I'm really starting to create some messaging around being very cautious about these things, because so many people want your money to teach you how to make more money. And my whole thing is if it's working for you, why aren't you just making the money? Do the math. I mean, if you really think about it, a lot of these people out there, they've proven that selling knowledge is really one of the best ways to get wealthy. The reality is, though, it comes with, from my experience in buying a lot of different courses and coaching programs that I've purchased over the years in a noble effort to try to improve, have found that they can be very, they're not as helpful as you think they're going to be.
They're very self-serving. It's then you got to get the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Always
and
the next thing.
There's no end to the trail. It's the same with some supplements I buy. I know what I want. I go in, I get it. And of course, every time you make the payment, they're like, oh, wait, here's another idea. Oh, wait, here's.
Yeah. I mean, you do the math, you go to these events, they're selling an $8,000 coaching program. There's 100 people in the room. 20% of people buy. This person just made 160 grand in one day. Right. So they're incredibly profitable. And, I just think that people really need to be cautious about where they're putting their hope, because what they're doing is they're selling it to people who really need that help, and they're looking for it. So they think they're doing the right thing, and then they end up, out even more money. I don't think all high ticket programs are bad, by the way. I just have had a lot of negative experience. So I really want people to be careful when they're online and really just do their due diligence and make sure they know what they're getting into, and make sure they're willing to commit to it. Because a lot of times what happens is the coaches will put it back on them and say, well, it's up to you to make this happen. And that is true to a degree. But at the same time, it's just a matter of making sure that it aligns with what you're really looking for. As far as my process goes, my process is really simple. I took it from an economist named Tom Hegna, who created it 30 years ago. And it's just always worked for him, for our company, for me, for my clients. I basically just start by, if you were to come into my office, the first meeting is just introductory. All I want to do is just get to know you, understand your priorities, understand if we're in alignment to work together, understand if I can even help. So it's really just a lot of questions and note taking and really learning on my part, listening and really trying to get an understanding of what you're looking to accomplish and how close you are to getting there and what we need to do to get to the next step. In our second meeting, what we do is we would actually spend time going through some ideas that I've identified that might be helpful, but will require some probably education. So, a lot of times when I sit down with somebody, they're like, okay, here's where I'm at. What can I do? Here's where I want to be. And I go, okay, well, I've identified a few things that could get you there, but I need to spend some time with you to show you how these strategies work and what things we can actually deploy to help make a difference. So our second meeting is really going to be like an educational meeting where I get to share some things. And then in our third meeting, that gives me usually enough time to assemble what I need to put together a path. And the path the process is the same for everybody. The outcome is always different. So we really look to do two things in our process. One, create enough lifetime income so you will not run out of money. And number two, remove all the other key retirement risks that could mess up that income. So for example, when people used to retire, you would work for a company for 30 years. They would give you a pension that would protect you and your spouse for the rest of your life. And that was retirement. And there was no retirement crisis. There was no running out of money. It didn't happen. People got pensions. Then they switched over to the 401k. And when they switched over to the 401k, what companies realized was it was much cheaper to match an employee's contribution than create a guaranteed lifetime income for the rest of that employee and their spouse's life.
Because they're outliving it.
Yeah, because people were living longer, right? Like people weren't, we learned about smoking. We learned about, advancements in technology and medicine, food, people were living longer. So when they switched over to the 401k, it put all the responsibility on the retirement saver. How much to save, how much to project they're going to need, where to allocate their money in the 401k. Well, 30 years later, guess what? We have a retirement crisis. People are running out of money. It shouldn't have been that way, but it's pretty obvious looking back in hindsight what happened. And so now you have all these people with these 401ks that are really like struggling. They're going, am I going to be okay? That's the big question they're worried about. And so that's where our process really lends a lot of clarity to those people, where we can say, okay, here's how we can make sure you're going to have the income you need so you're not going to run out. And here's how we're going to protect that income. And then once we've covered the bases, that's when I'll encourage clients to say, okay, you want to try something that's more of a calculated risk, feel free to at that point, because you've covered all your bases, but until you've covered all your bases to make sure your retirement's secure, all those other things you mentioned, while they can be much better for growth and making money, there's a risk factor there, right? And time is a big factor when measuring risk, because as you mentioned, you get closer to retirement, you don't have that same 20, 30-year window to make the mistakes and earn it back. It gets harder and harder. So you have to be more and more careful in where you decide to pursue endeavors to build your wealth.
And would you say, I mean, we've talked here because you tend to deal, if you're talking about retirement, people in their 20s and 30s, a lot of times think they're invincible, they're immortal. They don't care if they have health insurance. They don't care if they have good health insurance. They definitely aren't looking at long-term care, stuff and things like that. So, but is that something that you would look at, the people who are younger, who are listening to this, that there's things they can put in place so that they don't make your job harder by showing up at 60 and divorced and like, okay, now help me?
Definitely. I mean, for me, I've been pretty fortunate. Like my dad was in retirement for 35 years. So it's kind of like if your dad's a dentist, you're going to like know the benefits of flossing, so I've been very blessed because of my exposure with my family and what my dad's taught me. But I think there's a lot of things you can do. First of all, there's a lot of great books that you could start reading that would help to, have a better understanding and relationship with money that I think are important. So I think it begins with having a healthy conversation in the home about money. Sometimes you have spouses that are like on other ends of the spectrum in terms of how they think about money, how they handle money, sometimes even keep their finances separate, which I'm not against, but I think there's pros and cons to both.
Sure.
So I think it begins with having a healthy conversation around money, trying to learn from good sources. I'd be careful of like a lot of stuff online. You can get a lot of I was watching this thing last night of like TikTok reels of like financial, like they call it fin talk now. And it's like, oh my gosh, like so much bad stuff people are pushing and scams and just crap. So I think getting good sources, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a great book that I think that was one of my first financial books that I really love. There's a ton of great ones. But I think if
you don't mind sending me maybe a little list that I'll put in the podcast notes, or maybe somewhere I can send them, like to your website. And do you kind of recommend books on there?
Yeah, on my social media, I'm constantly recommending my favorite books. I'm a pretty avid reader, and there's a lot of great books that people could start reading. I got a bunch of them here that are awesome about how to save for retirement, how to start doing things that are wise with your money early. Smart Couples Finish Rich, David Bach, that's a great one. I mean, there's so many. So yeah, I can send you a little list. But I got some favorites for sure. But I think it begins with just learning about it, having good conversation, and then really just forming a strategy and sticking to it and being consistent. I think if you glean all the financial wisdom from like the experts, like, Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio, and really some of the biggest wealth managers in the world, they just tell people in their 20s and 30s to, basically just consistently always buy into the S&P 500. And that's what I do personally. And I'm not sharing that as financial advice to anybody. That's what I've learned. And, for me, I've gleaned from a lot of my clients being able to see what that looks like when you get to your 50s and 60s. If you can consistently do something, in a disciplined way for 20, 30 years, it's been proven that it works. So I think that's the key, is just getting some amount of savings that you're comfortable allocating instantly from your income, and just being consistent with that for a long period of time. And you'll wake up with, a nest egg when you get to retirement age. And that'll be really, really helpful for a lot of people.
we took my daughter through Financial Peace when I think she was like 12, and she sat here with us. We did the online version.
Nice.
And, he tells that story about the 16-year-old who started putting $100 a month away and had, I don't know what it was, like 1.3 million when he's a certain age.
Yeah.
And just from that, nothing additional. And so my daughter has taken that to heart. She works for Amazon, and she's in their 401k, and they do match at 50 cents on the dollar. And I get it when the market does crazy stuff. But hers has seemed to hold up. But yeah, I tried to instill that in her, that tithing, because not out of a grudgingness, but out of how that type of blessing comes back tenfold. And just, that there's no given. First of all, I had her old that mom's going to be around. Yeah. I'd like it if you're right. And if I get 20, 30 more years, that means I could maybe do something. And so that would be my next question. Okay. I am 60. I don't have a whole lot. And I think that there's a lot of people out there who are that way, who got here. And it wasn't because I was living paycheck to paycheck. I plowed my life into our family business. I never took a paycheck. We were just paying the bills and what have you. And the divorce just ripped everything in half. And so I've been slowly doing some things, but like, what is my hope here? Is there a possibility that I can recoup that? And I'm relatively healthy, so I don't know, unless the Lord has a plan that I'm not here much longer. What is the, some of the type of things? I know you'd have to really look at my story to tell me details, but
no, it's a great question. I'm excited to answer it. Can I just say one more thing that I really feel compelled to share about your previous question before we move on to the next one? I got one more thing I want to add to that. So,
sure.
So for the 20s and 30-year-olds, I just want to make sure I address this. There's two things I have to touch on, if it's okay, because you've
sure
set it up so masterfully. First of all, the reality is 90% of America makes less than $100,000. So regardless of what Instagram and TikTok are showing you, really all of these like get rich quick, amazing returns. And it's really popular in the crypto community right now, which I'm not anti-crypto. I own crypto, but I think it's dangerous what a lot of people are pushing about crypto and NFTs and all this stuff. Like, regardless of how people are showing they're getting massively wealthy really quick, the reality is when you look at the data from the Social Security Administration, that income's not showing up. So, there's a lot of fronting and fraud really that's going on online. And so, I think when you look at the really key people who are experts, like the Warren Buffetts, the Alex Ramosis, the people that have really built a lot of wealth over, doing it right. I think it's about being consistent and staying steady with whatever your goal is. That's important. And the other thing is, a lot of these 20 and 30-year-olds, one other key thing that I have to speak on is most of America is underinsured. So if you have a spouse, and you touched on it, like I might not be around, that's what triggered that for me was I'm really on a mission to help people get the right amount of life insurance. Like if you can get the right amount of life insurance and the right savings discipline for retirement, most likely, as long as you keep working and stay healthy, you're going to be okay. But making sure you have the right life insurance, the right disability insurance. And this stuff is actually a lot cheaper than you think. When you're in your 20s and 30s, it's a very inexpensive problem to solve. Like if you DoorDash one time a month, you can afford life insurance, like to make sure your family's actually protected. Right. So the other thing is some people go out and they'll buy like $100,000 policy and they think, oh, my family's good. But if you really do the math on how long that 100 grand would last, if you're not there to make income for the next 30 years for your family, it's really nothing. So to go out and get the proper amount of coverage is really, really important to secure that family. I just had to mention that for the 20s and 30-year-olds.
I don't know if you knew this, a couple of years ago, I did get my insurance license. When a financial guy I had been working with said he knew I wanted, Mark was great, but I just got nowhere to go there. Yeah. And I am going to lose the money I'm getting from alimony in a couple of years. And so I was like, all right, what do I do with my 3-day weekends? I could sell something. I think sales has to be it, even though I'm not a salesperson. Yeah. And so I looked into multiple things, but he made this offer, said he would mentor me in all of this. And that kind of didn't come to fruition. And it really ended up not being my space. But in any case, I did get the understanding. The presentation he would have is that young couples absolutely need it, because what will you do if that income goes away? If something catastrophic happens, and if COVID taught us nothing, it wasn't a respecter of persons. I mean, yes, some older people with comorbidities went, but a lot of people went who had comorbidities that were in their 30s. Are you ready for that? And people do think, oh, 100,000, if they only make 45,000 a year, that's a couple of years, but they're just not thinking it out. And that is one thing I got out of that relationship. I did get a policy that has a life insurance that has the living benefit. Does that sound right? The policy that has that, because, that's what it's going to have to be for me. I think I'm pretty healthy, but it's going to be something catastrophic, probably.
Yeah. And that's smart to add a living benefit. That's what No Stone Left Unturned is really at its core all about, is living benefits of how to make sure you're protecting your retirement with life insurance. And so, I think, that's also a big part of my mission, is to help secure families in our community and make sure that we're taking care of each other. And, it breaks my heart when I see the GoFundMe pages or the car wash funerals. And it's like, that problem is so inexpensive. There just wasn't a good life insurance agent that stepped up and said, hey, you could protect your family for really, really like less than you think. Right. And that's important. So I think, and even in FPU, like, Financial Peace University, they talk about making sure you have the right term insurance to go along with your savings strategy, so that you're protecting, and removing financial risk, right? That financial risk is way too high for most people. And if they can eliminate that, I think they'll be on a good trajectory. So to get back to your question, to provide hope.
For old ladies.
I'm all about providing hope. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. I think I'm about to interview an author on our channel who talks about how women, especially women who are divorced, kind of picking up the pieces, starting over, rebuilding, and closer, getting closer to an age where they want to be thinking about, how am I going to be okay for retirement? Having a great way to earn income is really going to be crucial. And then aligning your mission and your purpose with that can really alleviate a lot of that feeling of missing out, because, instead of the mindset of, hey, I work, now I'm going to be retired, it goes back to what I was saying. What are you retiring to? And if you can still find a way to provide value and you can be of service and it's fulfilling, I mean, that's the best feeling in the world. That's what God gives us. He's really a great redeemer of time. And I think in this new season of life, if you can go out and share your story, help people with that, I think that the blessings and there's a lot of abundance in that that can come with that process, from a fulfillment standpoint and from an income standpoint, that you can then save and start to put away for income that you could purchase for your retirement. So to me, I think the hope is exactly really what you're already doing. I mean, you're on the track of, sharing everything and then, being able to build a business around that and helping more people. I think that's, there's a lot of hope in what you're already doing.
I'm not the kind of person who can retire, like you said, be removed from service, like taken out into the desert and put out of her misery or whatever. I don't sit still very well. I'm a 7 Enneagram. And so I avoid pain while looking for the most excitement I can get out of stuff. And, I always say I'm fabulous, but that's not me being phony. That's my choice. Every morning, if I don't make that choice, the day will choose for me how it's going to go. And when you work in accounting and you do taxes and you have to tell people that they owe, people just don't want to. So it can be a really ugly day if I don't make the choice myself. And I joke that I'm going to have to die before I get to retire monetarily. But I really don't want that. I do want to do the drill down. I do want to see. I mean, I get it. I'm not going to suddenly accumulate millions of dollars, although if the Lord intends that with my book and with this process, then yeah. But I do want to know that I'm, that the basic necessities, that my house is covered, and that, and even maybe a trip, a couple times a year or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's something we can sit down and map out together in a series of meetings. But, I think that's important to touch on, is you don't necessarily need millions to retire. You need income. That's what's key, is you got to have, retirement is all about income and cash flow. So again, even if you don't, have necessarily millions, you can still create a pretty meaningful income with the right tools. And so that's one thing that I'm really, passionate about, is helping people to realize, like, hey, what is their potential? Can we look at maybe something that's even farther than we were thinking of originally for your potential, and seeing what we can do? When it comes to retirement income, there's 2 levers. You can increase income from assets, or you can decrease liabilities. So, monthly obligations. So if you look at those two levers and see where you can make adjustments, I think that's really important to help you get closer to finding out what you need to actually retire. But again, with what you're building right now in this phase of your life, you could be making an impact on people for quite a long time. And I just interviewed a 97-year-old client of mine, and he said the number one thing that's the most important for your retirement is to stay active. By far, the secret to living so long for him has been to stay active, continue to be serving, continue to be giving. And so, I want to do the same thing. It's easy for me to say in my 30s that I want to work, into my 80s but I really feel like I am the kind of person that does. I just want to be always giving. I couldn't imagine myself, like you said, sitting around watching TV. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's your vision of retirement, that's totally okay. You've earned that. That's fine. But I think you and I have discussed we're the kind of people that want to be out, continuing to grow and serve in a higher level, and constantly reaching for our potential. So, I think that if you have that, you really don't work a day in your life. And so it can be really enjoyable.
And we can't redeem our health. I mean, you can do something about it going forward, but you can't get back all the stuff you lost, the money because you were unhealthy, or, right, the time with the family. And I think personally, one of the best things for me that brings me exponential joy is serving others. And it doesn't need to be a public thing. It just needs to be, it's a salve for my soul to serve others and be helpful wherever I can be, and not be sitting still. And I get it. Everybody has their own thing. Maybe they worked at breaking rocks their whole life and they want to sit by the pool with an umbrella drink and yeehaw, I see value in that too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's some fun. You want to enjoy the ride and have some fun and take breaks. I get it. We got to recharge our batteries.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, I have, understand the cash flow. I tease my daughter. I tell her there's two ways to have more money. Spend less and make more. And so I'm sort of a Dave Ramsey person. I don't not have credit cards, but I don't have anything on them. And the only real debt I have is my mortgage. Unfortunately, I had to refinance the house when I divorced to get his name off, or they were going to force me to sell it within 6 months, and had a great mortgage guy and was able to do that. But I mean, I've been in this house for 25 years. It should be paid off. And instead I'm back at I don't know where I'm at right now, probably 25 year left. So I tease my daughter. I go, I'm going to die before this gets paid off. So I'm not funneling my money into paying off a mortgage, because I love her. And she tells me all the time, she goes, don't leave me money. She goes, I love how you live and you take experiences in life. She goes, I'll go make my own money. And I was like, all right, then.
That's awesome. You're raising a great daughter. That's incredible.
But I do have, a really good insurance policy, and it would take care of the house and then leave her in a position where she wasn't like suddenly strapped with a bunch of issues. But yeah, I do want to think in terms that unless the Lord chooses to take me home, if I'm going to have 20 or 30 years, that's plenty of time to put something in place that is an income stream, like you said, and not have, I get it. You get to tap Social Security if it's even going to be around, and that's an additional stream. But, I don't know that I feel comfortable relying on that either right now. I feel like I need to take matters into my own hands, or put them in your hands.
Yeah, I think what you said there was interesting, because going back to the millennials, I think there was a survey done. It's like something crazy, like 70% of them don't feel like Social Security is going to even be there when they retire. So a lot of people aren't counting on Social Security, and it was never meant to be the sole source of retirement income. But for a lot of people who are close to retirement age, it is a good cornerstone of retirement income. So we look at Social Security, and we look at how we can get enough income on top of Social Security to meet your basic needs to meet your lifestyle and expenses in retirement. And so, as you build the business, if you can take profits and get more income to make sure you have a baseline, then that'll have that security for you. Because the reality is, we can go as long as we can, but one day we won't be able to. We need something to take care of us. So you have a good time horizon. I really like your viewpoint on your time horizon. 20, 30 years, that is a lot of time to build and save for that day. So I think you're in a good spot in terms of your mindset, and I'm here to support and help any way I can.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have started rearranging I used to joke about, like I said, when I found out what midlife really is, that I'm 2/3. So my glass is 2/3 full.
Nice. Nice.
But I do have less time in front of me than I probably have behind me, because I don't believe I'm going to live to 120. But I do like to make the most out of how much time I do have. And I don't want to have it be a paralysis, overthinking or procrastinating or just being overwhelmed. And so I really I am a voracious reader, and I appreciate the recommendations you've made, because there are so much out there and people are so into social media. I just saw today the Threads thing that everybody's starting. And I'm like, really? We need one more thing that makes us antisocial and sit in front of a screen longer. And I get it. My writing coaches may tell me I have to go on it, but whatever. For right now, I'm just like, I am so overwhelmed by all the posting I have to do and all the stuff I have to do, that it's making me focus more on the process than on the journey. And I don't want to get caught up in, do I have the right mic?
Right.
I want to make sure that the connections I'm making on here are bringing value to anybody who would give me more than the 2-minute click through to stick around. So I really appreciate the information you've given today. I think there are probably more people, even from this segment, that would listen and stick around to hear what you had to say. And especially if we can, get some 20 and 30 somethings to realize you're not immortal. Things can happen, and you want to make sure that both of you, if you're a couple or even yourself going forward, like, even if you were a single guy and you own a business, and what happens to, your family and everybody that has to pick up if you're gone and there's nothing to help take care of that. Yeah. So I love all of that advice. And part of old school's mission is a smart man learns from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from others. So for my final little nugget that I ask everyone to tell me, and you may have a lot because you're well read and you're doing so well in what you do, but what is the one thing, regardless if somebody's 20 or 80, that you wish you had known sooner?
Start thinking about what you're thinking about. This is from Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I think outside of the Bible, which I get a lot of wisdom from in scripture, and for me, my pastor, I think Dr. Joe has made one of the biggest impacts in my life. And his whole message is to get conscious about what you're thinking about day to day. I truly believe one of your greatest assets is your mind and you. And so, I wish I had learned more about the subconscious versus conscious mind earlier. And I try to talk a lot about this with people because I think it plays a lot into what I'm talking about with retirement, even a lot of things we talked about here. But, we could have a whole other series of podcasts about Dr. Joe and his works and teachings and a lot of people in that space. But the reality is, and this is just straight from Dr. Joe, you're going to think 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And most of those thoughts are the same as the day before. And so if you're constantly living in that habit, your life's just not going to change as much as you want it to. So getting conscious of what your subconscious is telling you. And a lot of this goes back to Michele, your story, things that were put in there by other people that are repeating and they're actually showing up in your life. I think that's really the biggest lever that we have control over, that God gives us free will on to choose, like you said, choosing to be fabulous every day. That is a choice, but you have to practice it. And you have to retrain your subconscious mind to become your best friend, not your worst enemy. And if you can get that supercomputer in your mind to start telling you all the things you want to be true in your life, I'm wealthy, I'm healthy, I have great relationships, I love my life, the universe is helping me out. These things start to play back throughout your day. I think you're going to have a much more fulfilling life and you're going to get closer to your goals a lot sooner.
That's awesome. I think being intentional and being conscious of stuff. I had an episode that'll be coming out shortly that with my former trainer, who's also a pastor, really great guy, had some awesome wisdom for me as I was stepping into dating apps and stuff like that. But we did this episode and I asked him his nugget. And it was so funny how many people go to our mind and go to our knowledge or wisdom. And his nugget was given to him by his brother, that don't operate on the wisdom you have right now. And it was like mind blowing, because it's like, that's why you tap into the wisdom that's around you as well. Operate on the wisdom from those who have gone before, who've already done that. I mean, we are so, and every generation's done it. All of us in our 20s don't want to hear from anybody else. We're gonna work this out ourselves. And certainly trials and hard things shape us and grow us. But I just don't think we have to go through as much crap as we go through if we would humble ourselves.
True.
And listen. So, well, I love that. I think that's awesome. And I think people would get something to think about from your nugget.
I think that's good. Yeah, I encourage people to check out Dr. Joe. And
has he written books?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's written a series of books. There's some incredible works by Dr. Joe. He's got a lot of stuff on YouTube. And so, definitely I started with YouTube. I think he's got some great videos that are really impactful. You gotta be careful, because people will take his message and kind of make it kind of clickbaity, where they'll be like, you can manifest $1 million in 3 months. It's like, you got to ignore all that. His message is right on, though. It's really all about reprogramming your subconscious mind so that things start to align in your life. And he's definitely has a message of abundance. And so I try to share his message with as many people as I can, because I think it's really impactful.
I want to thank everybody for coming to class today. I want to thank Daniel for being here. If you'd like to connect with him and understand some of his resources, take a look at his channel, his website. Any of his connections will be in the show notes. And we totally appreciate if you'd come and take a listen, give us a rating or a review. And if you want to engage, Michele at michellevrabel.com is my email, or you can make comments on the podcast. And they're on multiple platforms: Spotify, Apple, Google, and YouTube for the video. So we really have had a great time today. And I thank you for coming to class, and class dismissed.